Right, okay. You lot, subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can catch all of our videos. And if you're really interested in the Krays, join our private Facebook group, Krays Crime Lords of London. You'll find over 1,000 videos and thousands of images. We're moderated and friendly. Come and give us a try.
The Kray twins were the most violent, feared and famous gangsters Britain has ever known. Professionals of violence, they used it to enforce their power and create by intimidation a wall of silence that gave them immunity from the law. As one witness at their final trial put it, if people talk to the police and the twins get off again, they'll have to send the plague carts into Bethnal Green and shout, "Bring out your dead." The Kray twins committed murder and manslaughter at will. A string of their brutalities included George Cornell killed, shot through the head by Ronnie while drinking at a public bar, Reggie shooting down and maiming a former ally in front of his wife and children in their council flat, Ronnie slashing a boxer's face to such effect it took 70 stitches to put it back in one piece, and he was nicknamed Tramlines, and the gory butchery of Jack the Hat McVitie. The Kray twins brought the threat of violence for the first time into the fringes of big business, society and politics, the world of suburban clubs and the new legalized West End gambling. Protection rackets apart, they were also deep into fraud, crooked share deals, organized intimidation and blackmail, and came close to building an empire of crime in Britain. What is most disturbing is the scale and the ease of their success. One can't help wondering uneasily whether it won't happen again. The Krays were from Bethnal Green, one of the poorest parts of the old East End and long notorious as a breeding ground for criminals. They were identical twins, the fact that ruled their extraordinary lives. The evil genius was Ronnie, the homosexual with his country house in Suffolk, his dreams of cutting a figure as a country squire, and his fantasies of becoming the English Al Capone, endlessly compiling lists of enemies to be maimed or eradicated. Reggie was a brilliant businessman whose wife committed suicide at her third attempt after only 2 years of unhappy marriage. Yet Reggie continued to dream of true love, marriage, kids, and settling down to a normal life, but unable ever to break away from his dominant twin, Ronnie, and his fantasies of violence, sadism, and power. The Krays were an old-fashioned East End family, tight, self-sufficient, and devoted to each other. The name was Austrian, and the twins had Irish, Romany, and Jewish blood. The centre of their world was to remain the tiny terrace house at 178 Valence Road, where they grew up and where their Aunt May and their maternal grandparents still lived. This row of houses was one of the relics of 19th century Bethnal Green, surviving among the brand new blocks of flats and municipal housing schemes. The area was badly bombed in the war. Before that, it was one of the very poorest parts of the entire East End and a breeding ground for criminals. It was Bill Sykes' home ground. The rookeries of Dickens were once just down the road, and Jack the Ripper murdered one of his last victims round the corner in Hanbury Street. The Krays were very much a part of this whole vanishing world of the Dickensian East End. All of the older members of the family were distinctive local characters. Good-looking grandfather Mad Jimmy Kray, a market man from Petticoat Lane, had been an outstanding drinker and bar fighter in his day. while the maternal grandfather, old Jimmy Lee, the Southpaw Cannonball, was a boxer, music hall performer, and passionate non-drinker who celebrated his 70th birthday by cycling to Southend and back. The twins' father, Charles Kray, was an old-style Cockney too, who made his money out of wardrobe dealing and itinerant gold buying through the country. A spendthrift, gambler, and devoted drinking man, he had inevitably been something of an absentee father during the twins' boyhood, and was on drinking terms with most of the famous East End villains of his day. He used to tour the provinces with his old clothes bag and his pair of gold scales, and earned good money. Even before the war, the Krays lived well above the standard of most families in Bethnal Green. But since Charles Kray was usually away from home for weeks on end, the brunt of bringing up the three Kray boys fell on their mother, Violet Kray. The eldest son, Charles David, had been born in 1929. The twins arrived within an hour of each other on the 24th of October, 1933. Reggie was born first. As a girl, Violet had been something of a local beauty. She was strong-willed, romantic, and possessive. She built her life round her three sons. Charles David was a gentle, easygoing child. But from the start, the twins were devils. They were identical twins, dark-eyed like their father, and extremely tough. They were also very fetching little boys, especially when dressed in the Angora woolen hats and coats their mother knitted them. She and their Lee grandparents doted on them. They were spoiled and indulged, particularly by Violet's sister, their Aunt Rose, a pretty woman with a violent temper who sometimes fought with other women in the street. She used to make a special fuss of Ronnie, who called her his Aunt Rose. The only setback to the twins' childhood came when they were 3 and caught measles and diphtheria together. Ronnie nearly died, and afterwards always seemed much slower and more gauche than Reggie. Reggie had charm and found it easier than Ronnie to get on with people. Violet attempted to make up for this by giving Ronnie more love than ever. The twins had always been inseparable. They fought continually, but would never let an outsider come between them. As often happens with identical twins, they appeared somehow different from the other tough, small Bethnal Greeners round them. This sense of their apartness seems to have persisted through adolescence. People who knew them say that they showed no interest in girls, but were somehow weird. They attracted trouble and loved fighting. Among the local teenage gangs, they were the toughest, most aggressive boys around, and the same twinship that marked them out was also a great source of strength. Together they were leaders and could beat anyone. These East End gang fights were a rough school of violence, but the twins managed to reach 17 before they had serious trouble with the police. It was then that a boy who had been badly cut and beaten in a gang fight testified against them. But their Old Bailey trial proved just a foretaste of many of their trials to come. Somebody got at the witnesses. The case was finally dismissed for lack of evidence. Throughout this time, the twins believed that they were somehow different from the other boys they knew, and built impressive lives of fantasy round a number of unlikely heroes. Wingate was one, Lawrence of Arabia another, and for some time, Ronnie's favorite book was The 7 Pillars of Wisdom. Such heroes made the twins eager for a life of action and contemptuous of a working life in the East End. Rather than take the only job that offered itself, as empties boys collecting crates in the fish market, they became professional boxers at the age of 17. Reggie showed far more style and promise than Ronnie, but military service ended their boxing careers. It was the spring of 1952 when they were called up to the Royal Fusiliers. They both objected to the discipline, went absent, and for the next 2 years were either on the run or inside military prisons at Colchester and Shepton Mallet. Here they met a whole range of aspiring young criminals, including one of the Richardson brothers, and made a clear decision to make their living out of crime. When they were both dishonorably discharged in 1954, the twins returned to Bethnal Green with nothing but their fists, a flair for violence, and the determination to become the most successful and most feared pair of criminals in London. What really started them off on their road to success and infamy was the Regal Billiard Hall. The place had known much better days. Now a snooker hall, it was a relic of its grandiose beginnings as a cinema. During the snooker boom of the 30s, the Regal in Eric Street was converted to a 14-table snooker hall. Now, like most of this part of Mile End, it seemed to have lost heart. Unpainted and unloved, it had become a target for the local small-time gangs who met here, fought here and tried cadging money from the manager. The insurance companies were wary of insuring it. There were rumors of its closing down. These rumors reached the twins. Since they had left the army, they had had time on their hands, and they paid the hall a visit. They felt at home at once. Reggie found someone to play snooker with. Ronnie, who disliked all games without exception, sat. He sat there all morning. There was no charge for sitting at the Regal. Next day, the twins were there again. Within a week, their friends knew this was where to find them. This suited them. They had always felt they needed a place of their own. Around this time, the violence at the Regal suddenly increased. The twins appeared to have no part in it, but there was trouble nearly every night. Tables were ripped. There were anonymous threats to burn the place down. Fireworks were let off. The manager decided he had had enough, and the twins made an offer to the owners of £5 a week to take the Regal over. The day their offer was accepted, the violence stopped as mysteriously as it had started. For their weekly fiver, the Kray twins became the legal tenants of the Regal Billiard Hall. They had to run the tables, the refreshment bar, and keep the place in order. In return, they had the takings from the tables. Soon, these amounted to a tidy sum, for the twins showed a flair for running the place. Tables were brushed each morning. Reggie repainted the refreshment bar. The hall was open day and night. For the first time for years, it began to show a profit. The Regal was becoming popular again. People were always dropping in to see the twins. Friends they had known from the army, men freshly out of prison who had been given their address, some of the local criminals, tough teenage boys from Mile End, out for a night's excitement. The Kray twins' reputation had got round, and from the very start, they were the real attraction of the billiard hall. As one of their old friends says, wherever that pair went, something would always happen. And if you missed a night at the old Regal, you'd be worrying all the time about what was going on without you. Next morning, somebody would be sure to say, "You should have been there last night," the things the twins got up to. And you'd feel real choked for missing out. Sometimes it would simply be a fight. In these early days, there were still people who would challenge one or other of the twins to a stand-up battle. Like the old villain from the West End, who kept calling Reggie son. Reggie broke his jaw. Or like the Maltese gang who called demanding protection money from the hall's new management. The twins went after them with cutlasses. Violence was certainly important as a source of sheer excitement, but it was by no means all the twins could offer their admirers. What they wanted from the hall was a headquarters, and like their grandfather, Cannonball Lee, the old boxer and music hall performer, they both had a touch of the impresario. They enjoyed having people round them and were true cockneys with their appetite for people, drink, and scandal. They always seemed to have the latest piece of news from the underworld, or to bring in some unexpected guest. Failing this, they livened things up with one of their practical jokes. Ronnie went for anything unusual. He found a giant from a circus once and brought him along for an evening and got him drunk. Ron liked midgets too. One night, he brought along a donkey with a straw hat. He said he was teaching him to talk. Now that he had found his audience, Ronnie could start developing the self he dreamed of. For years, he had read everything he could about Capone and the Chicago gangsters. He started dressing gangster style. Discreet, dark, double-breasted suit, tight-knotted tie and shoulder-padded overcoat. "I like conservative clothes," he used to say. "I can't stand anybody flash." Despite this, he was developing his own small vanities and getting quite a taste for jewellery. A large gold ring, a golden bracelet watch, and diamond cufflinks. In the early evening, he would be at the billiard hall playing his favourite part of ward boss, organising henchmen from some downtown pool room. He had his private chair and used to sit facing the door, watching as the regulars arrived. As the play started, lights would flicker on above the tables, leaving the remainder of the hall in shadow. Ron liked the atmosphere, just like a den of thieves. He loved a lot of smoke and noise and people. He used to hand out cigarettes and say, "Smoke up? There's not enough smoke in here." Then, when the hall was full and play was going on at all the tables, with the air as thick as any Limehouse fog, he would be satisfied. He would lean back slowly in his chair, smiling to himself, knowing quite well that everybody in the hall was waiting for him. He always kept the mugs guessing for a while. He was beginning to talk to them like a screen gangster, muttering a few words over a cigarette as he stared into space. Then he lapsed into silence. These silences soon got him known as a deep one, an unpredictable leader. Always keep people guessing. Never treat them the same twice running, an old West End gang leader told him once. People were becoming slightly wary of the twins. One of their oldest friends, who knew them long before the army, noticed a change in them. I began to see that I could only go so far with them, and however friendly they were being, they seemed to keep themselves that little bit apart. Neither of them liked being touched. Put your hand on Reggie's shoulder and you'd feel him wince. You wouldn't do it twice. But it was Ronnie people really feared. We was all scared of him, to tell the truth, someone told me. Not just because of what he could get up to, but because of what he knew. He had a funny way of looking at you that always made you think he was reading your mind. Sometimes he spent the evening brooding in his chair and left early. At other times he decided that he was drinking and picked a dozen hangers-on to go with him. It was always a bit of an event going to a pub with the twins. They used to like a crowded pub with a good singer and a lot of talent, and perhaps the chance of trouble. But these boys were now becoming much talked about in and around the area. The clues were starting to show of what would become in the end, the start of the most feared crime firm in British criminal history. That brings to the end this part. I thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there soon.
Leave a like and subscribe.